Well, by the age of 26, please correct me, she's already accomplished what so few achieve in a lifetime. Earlier this year, she was appointed as a UN High-Level Commissioner on Health, Employment, and Economic Growth, and is one of 17 global advocates to the UN Sustainable Development Goals Advocacy Group. I think most 26-year-olds wouldn't even know how to say that, or let alone know what that is. As an advisor to UN Security Council Resolution 1325, Alaa was selected last fall as the Security Council Civil Society Speaker during the 15th anniversary of Resolution 1325. She also serves as an advisor to UN Women, to the Council on Foreign Relations, and is a founding coalition member of Harvard University's Every Woman, Everywhere initiative. Her recent TED Talk, and I encourage everyone in this room to watch her TED Talk, it's phenomenal. What My Religion Really Says About Women was selected as one of 4 moving TED Talks by the New York Times. As you know, she's internationally recognized for her work as a champion of women's participation in peacemaking and conflict mediation. Alaa will be sharing with us today why it's important to challenge society and cultural norms. What a pleasure to have her with us.
Thank you.
Mandana, who wears a beautiful necklace from Afghanistan, which I'm going to try and hijack by the end of this luncheon. Mandana Hendessi is an incredible woman as well. Women for Women International's country director for Afghanistan and Iraq. I have seen a lot of her work. I know how in touch and involved she is. She's a dynamic and inspiring woman. And all of Mandana's 25 years of international experience has been in conflict-affected contexts, interfacing with political and civil society leaders, donor and international institutions to develop strategies on the involvement of women in governance and peace building, of course, and on the elimination of violence against women and children. Mandana, all of us, of course, are eager to learn from you as well and what's happening specifically in Afghanistan and Iraq, so we will have all 3 countries covered here. And also investing in women in all of these countries, as we know, is more important now than ever, and I know you can speak to that directly. So let's get started, shall we? All right. I have about 3 or 4 questions, because we know we like to keep this tight and informative, and I also hope to get to all of you in the audience. We will have some mics available to be able to take 1 or 2 questions, if you ladies are okay with that as well. Okay. Alaa, let's start with you. The international media reporting on Libya continues, obviously, to focus on the instability that has really ripped Libya apart for the past 5 years in particular. What is happening in Libya today, and what do you think it means for the women in Libya?
Well, I think, so first, international media has a tendency, the mic is not very happy with me. International media has a tendency to highlight the negative in any conflict situation, and it's because obviously that does change the dynamic, the political and economic dynamic, and the way the international community will involve itself. In Libya in particular, there are genuine issues. There's an issue of rising extremism. There's multiple, currently now one agreed upon government, but there's definitely some regional dissatisfaction. And a lot of it comes down to some of the transitional justice and reconciliation failures that we had post-revolution, and even during the revolution, a lot of the mistakes that were made. And they have been replicated in numerous conflicts. Libya is not the first. It happened in Iraq. It happened in several other countries. And so what I think is a learning lesson from Libya, if we can start learning from it early, would be better, is the recognition that inclusivity changes the dynamic in the long term. And so immediately following the revolution, a lot of women were excluded from the conversation. They had been fundamental in the actual revolution. They had provided food or transportation or information. And following the revolution, were put to the sidelines, as were minorities, as were many youth. And that exclusivity, that policy-making freeze-out, really has led in the long term to severe insecurity. And it's led to a changing dynamic of power, where women are considered, in their own sphere of power at home, capable, but in public, not necessarily accepted. And that's obviously increased over the years.
And that's, so 1 or 2 highlights of what you have been able to do okay, to jump in and counteract that, or inspire, make a difference?
So my organization, the Voice of Libyan Women, initially focused in 2011 on international human rights conventions. So we would use UN, conventions to help propel our message. And very early on, a wonderful woman in the mountains told me, I don't know what you're talking about UN conventions for, because we don't even have our own national laws being respected. And it changed the conversation we had internally and the strategy we had internally to start addressing the core issues. And in Libya, and in my view globally, be it in the United States where reproductive rights is a discussion that's dominated by culture and religion more than it is by actual science and intellect, as it is globally, what ended up happening was we said, okay, so what is driving this division in Libya? What is the main barrier? And I identified it as being cultural. It is the manipulation of faith in order to create a conversation where women are entirely excluded. And it's really built upon that, where you can't fight with God. You can't say that that's wrong. And it's very well done by religious institutions to maintain political and economic power. And so for me, it was about challenging that. So we launched the Nuit Campaign, and through the Nuit Campaign, we would use the same verses from the holy book, the Quran, and the same sayings of the Prophet, the hadiths, that individuals who opposed women's inclusion would use. And we would use them in their context. We put them on commercials, we put them on billboards, on stickers, we went and had seminars in schools, and more important than any of it, we did surveys. We needed statistics. I come from a medical background, and I can't sit and give anecdotal research. I need to have empirical numbers to say, this is what we can do, this is how we can change it. And so we were able to reach over 50,000 individuals in a few short months, and this is in a country of 5-6 million. And on media, we were able, because we got the signature from the highest religious authority, we were able to get media to put all our billboards and all our commercials up, and we were able to reach over 2 million people. And it really changed the conversation about, first and foremost, what are the actual barriers? Are they institutional? And if they are institutional, then they're obviously driven by individuals. And then what become the barriers? Those cultural and religious conversations that we need to have in our country, in our region, and globally. And second, it inspired for within families themselves to start talking about, okay, so why do we not want women to be involved in particular fields, and in other fields it's acceptable?
You call it, you say you have reclaimed your religion.
I think it is. I think we all have to. Yeah, I do.
And also, by what you've done, you have imams talking about subjects that were very taboo. Please tell everyone in this room.
So the way we organized the campaign was we had 35 cities in Libya, and because of the regionalism, so we took a lot of things into consideration. And one of them, and this is why I think women are so successful at creating local change, it's because they understand the local dynamics. And one thing that's very true is culturally, they're seen as a lot less threatening. So they're seen by the community as not necessarily wanting as much power, as much money. It's easier for women to get access in many parts of the world. And so what we did was we created local city teams, and these local city teams were led predominantly by women. They were 50% men, a lot of youth, and the most important thing we had was imams, local religious leaders, go into schools and deliver these seminars on early marriage, which was on the rise because schooling was decreasing because of insecurity, on extremism, on violence and domestic violence, and all these different categories that they hadn't necessarily spoken in before. And by having these male religious figures as advocates in communities where these conversations had previously been considered completely taboo was absolutely phenomenal. It changed the way the conversations which were had, and it ended up leading to our Minister of Justice then saying that victims of sexual violence and conflict deserve the same reparations as soldiers of war. So there were some drastic changes.
On a personal note, because a lot of women here in the room were so amazed really by what you've accomplished and your age. And I said, well, she came from a family of 11 children. So my guess is when there was family meeting time, right, that you had to fight to have a voice, and you just basically have continued that on for 26 years. Could you just give us a little insight to how this all happened at such a young age? Would you say it's your parents? Would you say it was how they raised 11 kids? Would you say they were progressive, or were they conservative? I mean, how would you describe?
So I think that's where the conversation about religion comes in and the way that we interpret religion, because my parents are very religious, but they strongly believe in women's engagement and women's leadership, strongly. And I find it interesting that people try to say if you're
particularly in Islam, if you're religious, you automatically don't believe in women's empowerment. They're one and the same to me. That is what my faith is. It is the empowerment of women. That is what it has been built on. So for me, my parents were, yes, religious, strongly believed in women's empowerment. And I always talk about the way we define leadership, unfortunately, in the world is it has to be the most publicly visible form. So if you're the CEO, if you're the president, and we fail to recognize that leadership, in my view, the actual power, the mobilizing and the credibility factors come from your local community. And so and that's usually doctors, teachers, mothers. And so my mother to me is, and I always say it to everyone, the first leader I ever knew. She was the first leader I ever knew. And she is the single greatest leader I know because, you know, one of my sisters chose to become a pediatric plastic surgeon. I chose to do what I do, and my other sister chose to be a stay-at-home mom. And in all three of those situations, my mother was equally supportive, and her view of leadership was giving people the tools to create their decisions and to do what is best for them and for their environment. And I feel like that is something that we often don't talk about when we discuss leadership. We assume it's all the big things, and we forget it's the little things that happen along the way that create the space for women to be architects of their own future and to be change makers. I wouldn't be here if it hadn't been for her. I wouldn't be here if she hadn't decided that, you know, she wasn't going to go by the general and the generic definitions of what women's empowerment meant or what religious meant, and she instead chose her own definitions and raised me by those.
So one more question, then Mandana, I want you to weigh in on this as well. So when you go into a Middle Eastern country, into a room of women or young girls, how do you empower them the way your mom empowered you? Because as we all know, especially I remember in Iraq, I mean, it was a very different culture. It was a very different understanding of religion, yet I saw some pretty remarkable young gals and even older women that really wanted to do something, but there was no one in their life to say that that was even possible.
And that's what it comes down to, validation. I mean, from the day we're born, women tend to get less validation from our communities, oftentimes from our families, from the world, that our opinions matter, that our perspective matters. I mean, and I can compare it, I remember in medical school, you know, I would give an opinion and the professor would be like, okay, that's good, you're not gonna use your degree anyways. And to the boys, he'd be like, that's wonderful. And it was half the answer I gave. So a lot of it comes down to validation and comes down to giving people the space to express their opinions and to express themselves, and really quickly on young women. Because there's a new movement on youth, peace, and security now. And it frustrates me because when people say youth, they often mean young men. And when people say women, they tend to mean older women when we're talking about the international community. And so young women are lost in that space, and that's the most detrimental time for them. They're lost in a period where they are most likely to be abused, they're most at risk, and that is when we need to go in and start saying, let's talk about education, let's talk about economic investment, let's talk about leadership, let's talk about mentorship. So if I walk into a room of particularly younger women, the first thing I tend to say is, I know you guys have points of view, and at 21 or 19 or 16 or 26, you know what all of this means, and you know exactly how it defines your life, so tell me and teach me. And there can be a reciprocal relationship where a lot of women who have had these phenomenal experiences can go and teach younger women, and vice versa.
Mandana, while so much global attention is focused on the plight of Syrian refugees in Europe and the overwhelming majority, as we know, of the 4.8 million Syrian refugees are seeking refuge now, Jordan, Iraq, Turkey, Lebanon. I know that Women for Women international efforts are focused on supporting Syrian women, refugees living in host communities in Kurdistan and in the northern region of Iraq now. But tell us and share with us in more detail what that means, just from I guess a global perspective. I mean, there's a lot of women here in the room that, we want to inspire everybody to not just lift up women here, but why it's so important internationally as well.
To give you some statistics, there are around 260,000 refugees, Syrian refugees registered in Kurdistan region of Iraq. And there's something like 500,000 Yazidi displaced populations in Kurdistan region of Iraq again. So we're talking about large proportions. Of course, not as large as Turkey and Lebanon and Jordan, but nevertheless quite a sizable one, and mostly ethnic Kurds. So in ethnicity-wise, they are different from other Syrian refugees. The issues that are most pressing, really, talking about why they are mostly vulnerable women, is because they don't live in camps. 60% of Syrian refugee women and Yazidi women don't live in camps. They live outside camps. What that means is that they have no means of support. They're not getting regular aid from international organizations, but they're also not entitled to benefits that local residents get. So they are on the fringes of urban areas. So they're the poorest. So economic autonomy is very important for women. But in addition to that, they are trapped in an insurgent conflict. Of course, there were some women or some families who were able to escape to Europe, but there are loads of people who are not able to do that. And they wouldn't want to do that. They want to be close with their families, and we are helping them to stay with their families because we don't want families to separate. And what's important is investing in women, because throughout the 20 years of our organization's life where we have invested in women, we've realized that that brings sustainable change. And what resonates with me very much were the messages that Amy emphasized, our video, the video that we were showing earlier emphasized, is that women are not victims of war, they are agents of change. And that's precisely the message that Syrian women refugees want us to know, that they are agents of change. They face tremendous difficulties in Kurdistan region. I was there recently. I visited a Syrian refugee camp in a town called Dar-e-Shekran, which is in Erbil province. What I was hearing from women, and these were, they're savvy women, they're educated, savvy women who live in refugee camps, engineers, doctors, lawyers, and they were telling me, yes, we are getting leadership skills training from various international organizations, but where can we exercise leadership? Where is it? Where is the space? That really resonated with me because I thought, yes, economic autonomy is very important. They need that. But they need to exercise leadership skills, because one of the most pressing issues facing them at the moment is sexual harassment. For some reason, men have got it in their minds that, this is whether they are Arab men, Persian men, or Kurdish men, have got this thing in their mind that Syrian women are available for sex. So every day they are facing this threat of rape and sexual harassment. The moment they step out of their door, they are harassed by neighbors, they're harassed by taxi drivers, they're harassed by employers, they're going for jobs, and the boss asks them, yes, you can have a job if you sleep with me. That's basically an everyday issue. They're harassed by people who provide services. So the very right of free and safe access to service is denied. Can you imagine? You want to go and see your doctor, and before going to your doctor, you have this fear that you might be harassed, sexually harassed by your doctor when you go to see him. That is an everyday issue. So to actually create a safe space for women.
So Mandana, how have you done that? I think all of us here in this room would immediately think, what can we do? We are here supporting Women for Women International, but when you hear that, we recognize the problem. We hear what you're saying. What have you been able to do? What more can we do?
What we have been able to do is that we are creating a space for women where they can actually come out of that isolation. You see, all these problems are compounded by an isolating urban life. So coming out of that isolation into a setting where they feel safe. They are with other women who might have experienced the same thing, so they can actually share these experiences and find solutions together. But having that voice yourself, not always I speaking on their behalf, or other international agencies, or UN speaking on women's behalf, or Angelina Jolie speaking on their behalf. We want Syrian women to speak for themselves. And this is exactly the space we are creating. So there is economic autonomy, so women feel confident, they've got a few dollars in their pockets, which gives them that confidence, power. But in addition to that, they have that space to exercise leadership and to have that confidence to speak for themselves. I think that's a very powerful tool for women. That confidence, talking about how they can protect other women, how they can prevent it together. We also involve men, not just men, but also women who are community. I mean, in Kurdistan region, women are also in powerful positions, Kurdish women. So we involve them as well. We involve them in understanding what gender-based violence, sorry for the jargon, but violence against women means and what it means on an everyday level for Syrian women.
I see you nodding your head. I know you want to add to this.
Well, I was just from the perspective of the challenges that women face in conflict. We had been speaking earlier, and I had mentioned that in conflict, everything is hyper-focused. So any differences in society, your ethnicity, your region, and in particular your gender. And while that's true and post-conflict provides very, very significant challenges, it also provides a window of opportunity. Because in conflict, things tend to get reshuffled. And there is more opportunity for women to take hands-on approaches and to be involved, particularly before the dust settles. So there's this, and there's this about 5 to 10 years, I would say, in many countries. Iraq and Afghanistan are going through it, Libya is going through it, where there is this opportunity to start changing the narrative about what women can do and how they can do it. And it's very detrimental if we don't do that now, that window of opportunity disappears. So what I see a lot, and I'm glad you mentioned a lot of international organizations, what ends up happening is a lot of international organizations will come, they will parachute in, they will stay for 6 to 12 months, something like that, depending on the amount of funding they get from the government, and usually what their foreign policy agenda is. And they will do very focused work. So they'll do a 5-day workshop with this group of women with no follow-up, and then they'll go to this region and do a 5-day workshop, and usually it ends up being women from the capital who they can speak with, who speak English, et cetera. And that, in my view, is actually quite detrimental because it creates a division between women who are working locally and women who have access to policymakers. And there is no actual focus then on women in rural communities, women in the most distant and the most, I think, oftentimes suspicious of the international communities don't tend to get any focus. There is no training for them, there is no support for them, and there is nothing long term. After the political or the foreign policy goal is met, that country may go, or another crisis erupts, that country may leave. And so those women are left without any more resources or workshop or funding or et cetera. So I think what is exceptionally inspiring about the work that you're doing and the work that Women for Women International is doing is the longevity of it, is the sustainability of it. Because there's this assumption that women's rights is something we can fix with a law, or it's something we can fix with one workshop, and it's not. Everyone in this room knows women's rights is cultural.
So what are you advising?
I'm advising sustainability. I'm advising being there for the long term. I'm advising working with people and recognizing that this is something, a cultural change they're going to make. And on average, cultural changes sociologically take 20 to 30 years for it to actually even begin. And so what we're looking at for the first time, we passed Resolution 1325, which is the Resolution on Women, Peace and Security in the year 2000. When I was not here. And I was not involved in this space. And I can say it opened phenomenal doors. But it's been 15 years, and only now in the past couple of years has it really been on the international agenda. Only now. And the reason women's rights is on the international agenda is because of violent extremism, and because violent extremist organizations were able to appeal to women's sense of agency before the international community could.
Absolutely.
That is why we've started paying attention to the fact that women can create change, because somebody else that we don't want got there first. So what I'm proposing is actually speaking to those women and ensuring that they know that they have that sense of agency, but allowing them to be part of that dialogue and creating this space where they can do it in the long term, where it's not a 5-day workshop, where she doesn't have to go to 3 countries to get a visa to show up to some conference, where you're going there locally with women who need it most to create change. Because the numbers speak for themselves. I mean, if you look at statistics, when a woman has any type of economical income, she puts 90% back in her community. So the sustainability is there. And if there's one thing that anyone who works in policy will know, the fact that women are so capable, the fact that women keep the schools open, they keep the lights on, allows for us in policy circles to almost ignore a lot of local crises. We know it's going to be okay. It's a sad thing, but it's the truth. We know that local leadership will handle it. And local leadership, when the majority of the fighting is done by men, the majority of the rebuilding is done by women. And we have to start empowering them and giving them the long-term support and the environment where they can go in a safe space, create not only economic support, but also have leadership and mentorship and learn from other women who have done it. That's what I'm proposing, and I think it's actually being done, so my idea is not very revolutionary, but I'll take all the credit. I'll take it all.
Woo! I was talking with a couple folks earlier on, okay, and I'm going to make the separation here. Younger generation, older generation, okay? Social media, has this been a good thing, a bad thing? There's many individuals, women leaders, with whom I speak in Iraq saying, social media has been the only way I've been able to get my voice out, and look at what I'm now doing in my community. I received, this and this and this from an organization in Kentucky. I mean, it's fascinating to see how social media, well, I want to know from you, positive or negative, when it comes to inspiring change.
Social media is, it's like anything else. It's a tool, and it's how you use it. I think one thing that social media has made clear is that it has phenomenal advocacy capabilities in terms of local awareness building, and it has recruitment capabilities. It can change people's minds quite quickly. You can put out a video, it can go viral, it can cost you much less, be much more cost effective, et cetera. And I think if anything, it highlights the importance for organizations to take on a greater advocacy role, to put out the right information, because if the wrong information is out there, that's equally dangerous. And I also think we have to remember, in many countries, internet penetration is less than 10%. And the people who are getting internet are usually men. They're not often older women or women. So we have to keep that in mind, that it's not the be-all and end-all. It is not our final answer. And oftentimes what we see on social media is from the more affluent groups, from people who have access to either a computer or a smartphone, and internet and all of these different things. So we keep that in mind. But do I think it's definitely created more points of access? Yes. Do I think it's created more points of communication? Yes. Do I think it can be used very, very wisely to create significant impact and change? Definitely. I just think that it has to be used strategically, and that we have to be very, very careful about the information that we put on it, and what kind of information we're sharing. Because for me, as a women's rights defender, social media is an extremely dangerous security risk as well. And it's very easily traced, and we have to be very aware that we're not, using it in that way. So we have to make very conscious choices. But I get frustrated when people say, well, the younger generation is good at social media and mobilization. I mean, the younger generation is good at so much more. If we look at all the greatest changes that have happened in the past 15 years, the way that most of us communicate on social media was invented by 19 and 20-year-olds. The way that we shop was invented by young people. The way that most of you probably came here on Uber, it was invented by somebody young. So, I mean, we have to recognize that there's phenomenal agency in young people, and it's not just limited to social media. It's not just limited to their ability to mobilize, but their ideas need to be institutionalized. Particularly young women need to be given a voice, because in the long term, we want them to feel as though that change was a change that they have created. It has to be, or else it won't be sustainable.
And then I have another question for you, but can we get the mics ready? And I'm having a hard time seeing those notes on how much time we have left. I am legally blind. Okay, I think you have 3 or 4 minutes. Can I go to the audience? Is that okay? Because I have a feeling there's a lot of ladies here that, not yet. Okay, you'll let me know when we can do that.
Only nice questions, though.
Are we gonna have no wireless mics? Oh, well, how about this? Why don't I go into the audience with my mic and let someone ask a question? Are you guys okay to go with the flow like that? Yeah. Can I have a thumbs up? Okay, we have a wireless mic issue, so you know what? What the heck? Does someone have a question? And I will use my wireless mic for you to fire it off. Where can I go? Oh, good, easy. Right in front, thank you. These heels are killing me.
I thought we had mine.
Oh, well, I'm sitting next to Norma, and I know she's been checking out my fashion, thinking, I need to work with her. Give me your name, who you are, and your question, please, Laura.
Okay. I have a question for Alaa. You mentioned that you went into communities at the local level with the imam who was there and talked to girls and women and perhaps mothers, I guess, about early marriage, child marriage, and things like that. I'm curious which is wonderful, how did you first get the imams on your side? Because that seems like a really important step, and once you break down that barrier, then the walls can fall, and girls can be saved from that terrible fate.
It's okay to work the smile in the eyes in a situation like that for a good cause.
Yes. Thank you, Laura.
So I don't know how much time we have. I don't think I can go into the details of that. It was a long time. It took us about 6 months to be able to have that conversation. But so there's certain points where I say you should work locally, and that's obviously with local leaders and particularly with women. There are some times where I like to just go from the top and get things done, and that's what we did in this case. So we were able to go from the top, get the signatures we needed from the Ministry of Religion, and then we were able to go to local communities. We had that credibility, which a lot of women's rights organizations, when they're talking about religion, don't necessarily have. And we were able to sit down with them, and once we sat down with them, it was very important that this was a conversation, that it was not us coming and telling you how to do things. I have no right to do that, but it was more a conversation of what are you, comfortable with speaking about, and they would present it themselves. And I think we do a disservice to a lot of men in particular in our community when we say, well, it's just the way men are. Men assume, men think. It's an excuse, it's nonsense, because we excuse poor behavior, but also we don't validate the men who are doing phenomenal work. And we were able to find men and women who are doing phenomenal work and ensure that they were part of a national project, which I think was able to inspire them to do more.
I have another question for you over here.
How do you feel that sustainable change is possible in regions that are challenged by rebel forces, the Taliban, ISIS? How does that affect Women for Women's work?
So here's the thing about sustainability. Would you like to go first? You can go right ahead. I'll take it after you.
Well, I think it's all due to your support that we've been able to continue this work for so long, and we're able to bring in new initiatives to various countries that we're involved with, because it's your support that has provided us with that stable, steady income to be able to think creatively about how we can actually reach out to women in need. And I think the credit will all go to you for bringing that change. And of course, we are working within a very challenging environment. We know that. But I think what really moves us is the energy, the positive energy that we see in women that we work with. I mean, I'm inspired by Syrian women. When I go to Kurdistan region, I'm always so happy when I'm going to Afghanistan and to Kurdistan region, because I know what I'm going to see. I'm going to see a whole bunch of enthusiastic, energetic women who are just so eager to do something positive, not just for themselves, but as Alaa said, for their communities, to bring sustainable change for themselves and for their communities.
Yeah, I think when it comes to sustainability, there's two key things that I think of. First and foremost, aside from the empirical research, which shows that women are the single best kind of catalyst for community change, there is the fact that I started an organization when I was 21. I Googled how to start an organization when I was 21. I had genuinely no idea what I was doing. And I have learned over the years. But one thing that I can say for certainty is that there is a phenomenal audience of women and of peers that I've worked with that have continued to do the similar work in their own communities. Because of one person, we're now working in 28 countries. We're now able to reach audiences of millions. We're able to have these conversations. And that's me. If you think of the 400,000 plus women that Women for Women International has worked with, then you can imagine the amount of change that's happening on the local level. And in terms of sustainability, I don't think any of us is questioning the fact that there will always be conflict in the world. I don't adhere to the belief that suddenly it will all disappear and we will all live happily ever after. What I do know is if there's always going to be conflict in the world, there will always be people benefiting from conflict, from the money that's involved, from the construction, from the weapons, and there will always be people who are losing from conflict. And if we think about who we want at the table to solve conflict, it's probably the people who aren't getting anything from it, and those are women. So the sustainability comes in the fact that we have a long-term problem, we need a long-term solution, and our partners in it are, just by logic and common sense, women. So we need to enable them to actually make that change on the ground.
If you've been inspired here today during this luncheon, could we have a round of applause, please, for Mandana and Alaa? What an honor and a privilege. Thank you, ladies, so much.
Oh no, it's been an honor for me.
And we hope to see you next year.